yesterday? Any questions from yesterday? Okay, just a quick reminder. We are in chapters 3 and 10 for the week. Please, please, please make sure that you are reading chapters 3 and 10. And if you have not read through chapters 1, 2, and 7 from last week, make sure you do that. Your midterm exam is on Thursday, and it comes straight from the book. Straight from the book. So you're not going to be able to just look at the slides. It comes straight from the book. It is open book, but unless you're going to be flipping through 5 chapters, that's not the way to go. So make sure you're reading. The chapters are not that big, so it shouldn't be that hard. So please, please, please make sure you are preparing in advance for that. Remember your the percentages for your grades. Refer back to that if you don't remember, but I do believe it's 15% of your grade. So it's going to be very, very important that you do well on that midterm. Are there any questions? No? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So today we are in chapter 10. Today we're in chapter 10. And this is going to help you prepare for that interview. I know we've been talking about that mock interview. You're going to be setting up the mock interviews this week. You'll physically have them next week. Today, starting between today and Thursday, and I'll go back over this again at the bottom of the hour. You're going to be setting up your mock interviews. So let's talk about the interview. I know a few of us had a question about the interview process and what do I do? What do these people expect from me during the interview? So it's my objective to demystify what the interview is all about. And hopefully by the end of this session, you guys will feel a little bit more comfortable with going into the interview process. So we all know that the start of the interview process begins with what? An invitation to interview. So at some point, hopefully in your job application process, you'll get a job interview. This is your opportunity to, really showcase what's on your resume, because oftentimes they've read your resume, and the resume gives them a sense of what you've done, but it's your job to really express to them how well you've done it. I always tell people, if 2 HVAC candidates come and they have similar backgrounds, what's going to make one stand out from the other? Well, number one, we talked about that yesterday. Everybody brings different skills, right? There's a lot of transferable skills that you're bringing to the table that's only unique to you. But the other piece of that is, how well can you articulate how well you've done your job? There's so much that we all do at work. So what is it that you are going to showcase to let them know that you are the person for the job? And so we're going to be talking about what that looks like. When you do get an interview, it can come in a lot of forms. My friends, we all know, what is the most primary way that we are connecting now? Are we connecting now via phone, email, text? What's the most common way you guys think? Anybody? Oops. Sorry, not sure what happened here. What's the most common way? Typically, Go
Social
ahead, sir.
media. I'm
Well,
sorry.
no, you know
So
what's funny? No, it's so funny you say that because I think there's some truth to that. If you have looked for a job via some type of social media, but the employer, oftentimes they are going to want to engage you, believe it or not, via text, social media like LinkedIn, email, right? Phone calls probably are the last option nowadays. Why is that important? How many of you check your emails on a regular basis? Hmm.
yeah,
How many of you, Zachary says I do. How many of you
The answer is
keep,
no.
well, you know what? It gets worse. Because how many of you keep your voicemail boxes clear? I am guilty as charged. I
Yes.
had to, and I've been embarrassed a time or two from a company saying, Miss Taylor, I've been trying to get a hold of you, but your voicemail box. Now I'm going to blame Florida because I'm going to deflect. When I moved here from Jersey, I did not get as much spam calls as you do in Florida. And I actually had to like do some research on that. And the research suggested that this 407 area code, for some reason, the scammers got a hold of it. And if you have 407 area code, oh my goodness, you get spammed a lot. So I actually had to change my area code to 689. I'm like, I can't do it because the spam calls are ridiculous. And I couldn't keep my box clean enough. I had to, do all, of course, all the blocking and all of that. But you don't ever want a company to say, I can't get a hold of you because your mailbox is full. Because what is that saying to them? How do you think they're going to think about that?
You can't prioritize things in your life.
Yeah, I'm telling you, maybe, there's some issues with you. Maybe you're not serious. Maybe you're overwhelmed. Like it's just not a good look. And you don't want people judging you before they've even met you. So, and what about your email? Like they sent you an email on Monday and you don't respond till Thursday. Not a good look, right? So, if you are actively looking for a job, you need to be actively responding. Even if you are looking on LinkedIn and Indeed, nowadays, when you have your Indeed and your LinkedIn accounts, they're responding back to you via Indeed and LinkedIn. I also had to learn the hard way about that because, a few years ago when I was using Indeed, I mean, I still use it, but I wasn't checking my account. And I had seen where they had responded to me via Indeed. And I was like, oh, Lord, I missed that opportunity. Like, that's embarrassing. So you don't want that because you can miss opportunities. So it's going to be very, very important. Now, once you do get this invitation, you want to make sure you respond, like I said, immediately. Again, now I'm just going to say this. Joshua, you had a question? You can go ahead, honey. I see your hand, but I'm not sure. Um, if you do not have, how should I say, good phone etiquette, you may want to get good phone etiquette. You never know who's calling you. Yeah, you know how sometimes you call people and their phone etiquette is, huh? Let's just say, and then they realize it's a job opportunity, and then they have to like, you know, reshift. It's the damage is done first impression, right? So you want to be careful with that. If you have that, make sure you keep that professional tone at all times because you never know who's calling you. Does that make sense? Like you don't want to get caught like that. Uh, because then the person is like, ooh, is this what I'm going to have to deal with? So, be mindful of that. Now, here is some demystification. Let's talk about these types of interviews. I know this is the good stuff. There are 3 different types of interviews. Nowadays, the HR department will give you that initial call. And I know it's so frustrating because we get really, really excited when we get some type of response back from the company. And let me caveat that with, it does depend on how big the company is, because if the company is really small, they may not have all these nuances. But the larger the company, the more protocol and infrastructure they'll have in place. So 9 times out of 10, the HR person whose job it is to do the initial screening anyway will contact you first. And you know it's going to be a screening interview when they say things like, we want to set up a 15-minute phone call. We want to set up a 15-minute, session, or they'll send you a Microsoft Office Teams, which is another thing we'll talk about in a minute. And it's only for 15 minutes. 9 times out of 10 is just the HR person. Then you have either a structured interview or unstructured interview. With a structured interview, we'll get into it. It's more your traditional interview, sitting around the table with them or being on Microsoft Teams, or, an unstructured could be them telling you to meet them at the job site, and they're going to walk around and talk about what's the job on the site. You have to be prepared to know what type of interview you're walking into, right? There's nothing worse than, walking in with some heels on. They're like, yeah, we're gonna we're gonna have you, work with the animals for, 20 minutes. You're like, what, lady? I just bought this dress, right? So it's very important that you know what type of interview you're walking into. So when it comes to a screening interview, it's really about checking your resume. They want to make sure that before they pass you over to the actual manager that's looking for the job, that what you've said on your resume, they understood it. So it's not like they're checking to see if your resume is right, but they want to ensure that what they have read on your resume before they pass you over to the hiring manager, the person that, put the call out to say, hey, I need someone, it's correct, right? Because essentially that HR person is the one that's kind of selling your resume. So in those 15 minutes, trying to make a good impression, I know 15 minutes is not a long period of time. And sometimes the HR person does go longer than 15 minutes. You can always kind of tell the type of interview it's going to be by if they're rushing you along or if they're actually digging into your background. Like you can kind of tell by, their attitude. Now, if you happen to get an HR person who is kind of being engaging with you, this is your chance to make a first impression because it's their job to fill that role. And the more great things they can say about you, the better. Now, there's some HR people, they're just going to get 10 resumes, put them together, make sure it's right, and just throw it at the hiring manager and be like, hey, you do it. But there's some HR managers that are a bit more proactive. They're going to be like, I really like Sammy. I really like Joshua. I think you should really pay attention. They're going to put little stars on your resume. So right from the gate, even if it's a screening interview, try to make a good impression. I happen to use humor in my lovely personality. Now, I'm not saying start telling jokes. Now, don't be Bernie Mac. But what I am saying is try to make your personality come through, right? Don't be very stoic. It's very difficult to make your personality come through via the phone. And most of these screening interviews will be done via phone. They won't want to see you. Because they're pushing through resumes. They're most times, 80% of the time is done via phone. So it's sometimes hard to sell yourself, but try to be personable enough, to stand out during that screening interview. Does anybody have any questions about the screening interview? Does that make sense?
Yeah. When it comes to things like let's say I prefer to talk to the person. Is that okay to ask, or do I have to abide by what they prefer?
What do you mean by talk to the person?
Whether it's in person or on the phone, I much rather speak to the person so I can get a sense of how they feel about the conversation
Oh, it's
versus
like
just
you
texting
want to
or email.
physically see them. Now, that may be a bit difficult with the screening interview. When it comes to that actual interview, you'll definitely, I'm gonna say definitely, but there's sometimes do actual interviews of your phone as well. But 90% of the time, if you get selected from the hiring manager to interview, they're going to do either in person or via Teams, like a video. Now, it really just depends on a couple of variables. Most times it depends on if the person's busy. Sometimes the person could be out of town and they have a short deadline. So they just want to meet, they want to do a video. If they're in town, or if it's a requirement, like a lot of you guys, are in fields where they physically want to see you. Sometimes they don't want to see you until maybe the third interview. And I know it's like, oh my goodness, I have to do a third interview. Sometimes it just depends. So in most of your industries, it will be in person, but it really depends on, again, how big the industry is. So I know if you're not a video person, at least you get to see their face. And sometimes they don't want to show their face. Not everybody loves to do face to face. I know it's hard to believe, but for the most part, they're going to want to meet in person or via video, the hiring manager. But most screening people, no, they want to just do a quick phone call, unfortunately. So, you got to kind of bend a little bit for that. But your main interview will definitely have some type of face to face for the most part. Does that make sense? Thanks to us, technology, that's how things have gone. So when you do have your interview, and we call it this structured interview, it is a formal interview, right? And it's there to determine, if you are the right person for the job. Sometimes it's known as a directive interview. Typically everyone's asked the same questions because they want to see, the difference between you and the other candidates. In order to evaluate apples to apples, they're going to, ask everyone the same question. And this is where I say you have to try and sell yourself. Now, what will normally happen, the very first few questions that they ask are going to be get to know you questions. So they're going to say something like, tell me about yourself. They're going to say something like, walk me through your resume really quickly. Or they're going to say, maybe, how did you start? Why, how long have you been doing this? How did you get started? Really quick, one or two, tell me about yourself. They may even start by telling you about the company. Now, here is where you start to showcase yourself. You should already know about the company. How do you think you learn about the company? What are you going to do before you show up at that company? What do you think you're
Google
going to
it.
do? Oh, you better. You better. Like, come, my friends. Don't ever show up at a company and don't know about the company. Unless it's so tiny they don't have anything on the internet. But don't show up at a company and they're the newest company in town and they just got this really big contract with the government and you don't know anything about the company. And they're talking about this contract and you're like, "Ooh, really? That's interesting. I didn't know that." Like, no, don't do that. Like, if it's in the news, you should know about it. Make sure you know about the company. Make sure you know the basics, who the CEO is, how big the company is, if they're national, if they're local, if they're global. you know, Go through their website to see if they have any, things that may stand out. So if the person starts talking about it, because that could be the person that won that contract with the government, so they're really excited, and that's why they're hiring you, because they're expanding their department and you don't know anything about that. That's not a good look. But if you do, what is that going to do? Now you're engaging. Now you're creating a conversation with them. Now, this get to know you portion is only brief, right? So don't take cues from the interviewer. If they have brevity, which means that they're kind of short and sweet, they want you to be short and sweet. If they're a little bit more elaborative, they kind of want you to be more elaborative. This is where, like Ian was saying, you gotta read the interviewer, right? Because you're taking cues, like it's almost like being on a date. Make sure you're paying attention to their body language as well. Don't spend too much time on one question, especially those get to know you questions. From there, so they'll talk a little bit about the company, and then they're going to ask you a little bit about yourself. When they ask you questions about yourself and they say, tell me about yourself, what do they want to know? What do you think they want to know when they ask that?
They want to know your work ethic.
What else? What do they want to know? Anybody else? Well, here's what they don't want to know. They don't want to know how many dogs you have. They don't want to know where you grew up. What they really are saying is, walk me through your resume. And here's what you want to do. Everything is focused on, why are you here? So when they ask, tell me about yourself, they're really saying, why are you here? Why did you apply to this job? We put out this job. We need a new HVAC tech. Why did you choose our company? It's almost like you're on a date. When the person goes, why me? Right? Anybody ever been through that? They really just want to know, why are you here? So what you want to do is you want to work backwards. You want to say, one of the reasons why I applied for this job, and then make it personal. It's because my grandfather, was always in HVAC, and I knew one day that, I was helping him as a kid, and I really liked it. And I said to myself that, this is something that I want to pursue one day. When I got an opportunity, I used to work with him during the summer on, different little projects, and I became really interested in it. After I graduated high school, blah, blah, blah. Keep it short and sweet, but that's what they want to know. Why are you here? Why is this company? How did you arrive here? If you have something on your resume that doesn't speak directly to what you're doing, you can always say, when I graduated high school, I went into this arena. Then I decided, after, having kids, after getting married, after working in this industry, that it wasn't fulfilling enough. So I decided to do this, right? Everything starts and ends with you being at that interview. Does that make sense? So tell me about yourself is really about, how did you arrive here? Any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay, very good. Now, when they get to the specific questions, that's when they're going to dig into the job description. This is where you showcase that you've read the job description well. They may say one or two things. Either they're going to say, the job requires you to deal with large animals if you're VA, right? Because let's say you applied to work at a zoo, and you're specifically working with large animals. So they may ask you a lot of restraint questions, right? And you're going to take cues from that, because if you read the job description and they've said that a couple of times, you should already know they're going to ask you questions about constraints, right? So you need to be prepared to have a couple of examples in the back of your head, because this job description, put out a lot of constraints. Let me have one or two, examples of that. Or they may, say, hey, walk me through your resume if you've had a lot of experience. But when you walk through that resume, what are the things that you're going to talk about? You're going to talk about those keywords from their job posting. Don't spend too much time on things that they're not interested in, right? Because you're really trying to showcase how your experience aligns with those keywords in the job posting. So they may start with, okay, tell me about this job, or why, they'll ask those very, questions they're going to ask everyone. And those same questions are going to be centered around those keywords that are in their job postings. So you want to have at the ready some examples. I actually would take a notepad with me at an interview, and I would have triggers because you're nervous at an interview, right? So I would have little keywords written down on my notepad. They don't know what it is, to remind me which example I'm going to give. Because if they start walking through my resume one by one, well, tell me about this job and what did you do with that job? And I want to make sure I pull out those keywords from the job description that I'm aligning with my resume. And, tell me about a time you had to work with a team, because at this company you work with a team. I'm gonna look down at my notepad and, I may have Sammy example, because that Sammy example was a time I worked with a team, and I'm going to use that example. Does that make sense? Because that they're going to ask for examples. So you want to have examples at the ready. You don't want to be like, oh Lord, let me just come up with something. And that's the part that makes us the most nervous, right? So that's why I say, hopefully this is helping to demystify the interview process. Is this helping?
Yeah.
Because the more you are prepared, the more you kind of understand the structure of it. And, I did some HR work, and I hired, a lot of people as a hiring manager, and we all do it the same. Some hiring managers, they just pull down questions from the internet too. So that is something else that can help you. You can go to the internet and you can pull down sample questions for electrical people, because 9 times out of 10, they've done some of that too. They're going to ask you questions specifically about their company, but they're also just going to pull down some interview questions. So you can pull down some interview questions that people typically ask and prepare yourself. Now, in an unstructured interview, what tends to happen is they may say, come in your work attire, right? I'm sure your instructors have told you that, right? So if you're an HVAC or welding, you may have to come, with, proper shoes, proper, safety attire. If you're VA, they may say come in, your scrubs. They may want you to spend half a day, an hour on a job site and see how you do. Those structured interviews, it's still an interview, right? Don't get comfortable. They're still watching you. They're still trying to see what you can do. In those situations, they want to see how hands-on you can be. You don't have to go in there and start building things. Trust me, they're not going to let you work on the project, but they do want to see how comfortable you are in that environment. So if they're walking you through the job site, or they're explaining things, you want to nod, you want to be like, yes, maybe ask some interesting questions about the project. Like, don't try to oversell it like you know everything, because if you're newer to it and you just graduated, you're not going to know. However, you can be interested in the project. So if you've done some research and you know that they just got this new construction project, and again, that hiring manager, he's so excited, he's telling you about this project, you can ask follow-up questions like, oh yeah, I see this expansion that you guys were doing. I read about it. So is this the project here? And then he's going to be so impressed. He's going to be like, yes, yes, Terrence, yes, Jenna, I love it. Yes, they're going to feel like, yeah, this person is part of the team already, right? That's how you win them over, because they want to picture you in the role. What's the best way to picture somebody in the role? when you feel like they're already part of the team? How are they going to feel like you're already part of the team unless you start talking like you're already part of the team? Make sense? So again, do your research on that company. Go to their website, search on the internet. If you know people at that company, which is even better, because if someone is referring you, you need to pick their brain about that company, right? Tell me about, now you don't have to try to figure out who's who and all the gossip stuff, but I'm talking about, tell me about the company. Tell me about, why are you guys doing this project? Who are the competitors? What's your main, service that you're doing? Why you guys have this new project? Did you lose people? Sometimes I ask questions like, was there a reduction in staff? Am I taking a position that hasn't been filled in 5 months, which we know with this current climate, sometimes that may be the case. You need to know what you're walking into, right? And sometimes even by answering those questions, you may decide that you don't even want to apply for that particular job. But that's why it's important to do your research. I have gotten caught up in situations where I'm coming into a audit. Like I went to work for a university and they were in the middle of an audit. Now, if anybody's ever been a part of an audit, and I was working till midnight, and and on the weekends, because they didn't tell me they were in the middle of an audit. So I walked right into that, and now I have to showcase my abilities. Now, luckily, I had gone through an audit before, but that's something I would have liked to have known. I have a child, and so I have to make arrangements for stuff like that. So you want to ask questions, in the interview. That's one of the follow-up questions, and we'll get to it in a minute, that you want to ask. Like, you don't want to get caught off guard with, oh yeah, can you start tomorrow? And then next thing, we're going to need you to work the next 3 weekends because we're preparing for a major project. So one of the questions I ask is, do you have any major projects? How long has this position been open? What do you expect from me in the first 90 days? Like, I ask those questions because I need to mentally prepare myself from what I'm getting into, right? Now, of course, during the interview, you are the focus, right? They're there to ask questions to learn about you. Yes, we've discussed that. It's a good time for you to showcase your personality. Ain't nothing wrong with showcasing your personality. If you are highly, knowledgeable, you can talk a little bit about it. Like, don't overdo it. If you tend to, have some experience with that particular project before, of course, showcase that, but just understand that these interviews are not always going to be face to face, but most times they are, which is good. But again, try to showcase who you are, because right after you're done, guess what? Somebody else coming right behind you. And the same way that you feel this is the perfect job for you, they're thinking this is the perfect job for them. And we don't normally think like that, right? We don't normally think that we're like, oh my God, this is the perfect job for me. It's right around the corner from my house. It's exactly what I want. And guess what? That person that's sitting next to you in the lobby is thinking the exact same thing, unfortunately, right? And we don't think in that way. So, it's kind of like when you were house hunting, you don't ever want to, fall in love with something until it's yours. If you are doing an in-person interview, let me tell you, from the moment you pull into the parking lot, you're on the interview. You don't know who's looking outside the window. You don't know who just pulled up next to you. It could be the hiring manager. Now, again, so if you're not a morning person, or maybe you just had a bad conversation with somebody on the phone and you're thinking you're not going to put your game face on until you actually sit down and talk to someone, you're in trouble. Your game face should be on the moment you step outside your car. You don't know who you're walking into the building with. You don't know who the receptionist is. That could be the owner's daughter. You understand what I'm saying? So even if you're walking through the door with someone, you're on the interview. You're on that interview until you drive off that lot. Does that make sense? So make sure that when you're at that job interview, you are ready to go. Any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay. Now, there are things called a panel interview. Has anyone by thumbs up ever done a panel interview? I know most people hate it, but I'm going to tell you why it could be positive. A panel interview is when there's more than one person that is interviewing you, which may give us all, anxiety. Now I got to look at 3 different people. But sometimes I like it. That means I get 3 in 1. I don't want to have to come back here 3 times, right? So I prefer you just go ahead and knock it out the box for me. If I have to meet with the HR person plus the hiring manager and a coworker, or sometimes they'll do like the hiring manager and the senior manager who you're never going to see, but he or she just kind of wants to, take a quick look at you. Hit me all at once. Hit me all at once, baby. I prefer it that way. Some people don't, but I don't want to have to keep coming back, because there's nothing worse than getting to a 3rd interview and then not being chosen. Like, you're all excited. You got through the screening, you got through the hiring manager, now you're talking to the supervisor, and then they choose somebody else, right? Are there circumstances where some companies just go through the motions, but they kind of already know who they want? Yeah. Luckily, it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen, unfortunately. But that's neither here nor there. We're gonna pretend that all interviews are real interviews. And sometimes, let me tell you, they can have someone in mind, and then you're so good, they're like, forget that. I'm gonna make a place for you. I've had that happen to me, and the people have actually had the nerve to tell me the truth. Well, we were kind of looking at so and so for the job, but you know what? There's another position we can give her, or there's another position that we have in mind for you, because they just liked me so much. I don't know if anyone's ever had that experience. So you never know what you're walking into, but again, sell yourself as much as possible, right? So if you do have a panel interview, how will you know? Ask the screener. So you want to ask the screener as much as you can in terms of what is coming next, especially when they're just a screener. How many people will I be interviewing with? Will I be on the job site? Am I, is it a location that I don't know about? Because maybe you Googled it and you're thinking you're going here, but they're going to have you go to another site. Don't assume that it's the address that you Googled. Make sure you ask those questions. There's nothing worse than going to the wrong place. Does that make sense? Do we have any questions?
I don't.
No? The last thing I want to talk about is, the follow-up, because I know sometimes people say, okay, well, when do I ask about, and we're going to be doing part 2, so we're not done. We're not done. Tomorrow we're going to have part 2 of chapter 10. Post questions, when do I talk about salary, the stuff like that. But for now, this is where we're going to end this conversation. Does that all make sense, guys?
Yes.
Anybody learn anything today? Y'all know how I feel. Y'all know about my ego.
Kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of, Ian. Thank you, my heart people. That's all right. That's all right, Ian. I'll try to do better tomorrow for you then.
I've been forced to learn a lot of this already.
Oh, okay. Okay, then I understand.
I've had 5 physical interviews.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Look at, look at my, y'all feeding my ego. I feel like Donald Trump. Okay, thank you so much. All right, let me stop. All right, so here we go. Thank you, Josh. Here's our question for today. What was your most hated interview question and why? That's your
How many
conference.
are we allowed to do?
What was your most hated interview question? I know for me, it used to always be tell me about yourself. Because I'm like, lady, man, what do you want from me? I can be all day. I never knew how to answer that question. Right? So, what was your most hated interview question and why? Now, don't confuse this with your discussion post for the week, which is gonna be tell me about your worst interview. Now, that one's gonna be interesting. I told you guys last week, how I had a crazy interview once when I was leaving the military, and I had to stop and help this guy on the side of the road because he almost cut his leg off. So I jumped out the interview off the interstate to help the guy, and then had to go to the interview, and I completely froze at the interview. Right, so that was definitely one of my worst interviews ever. I'm traumatized by it, and that was almost 30 years ago. But what was your most hated interview question? Is all we want to know. What was your most hated interview question and why? In your discussion post, you're going to be answering, what was your most hated interview? We got it? Everybody got this down? My friends, let me tell you, some of y'all are showing up at my live session, and I really love it because it really helps my ego. But then you're not doing the conference question. I'm so confused. You cannot get participation if you don't do the question by 12:30. Do we understand? There's one or two of us that are not doing the question. I get really confused. I'm like, well, maybe they really enjoyed my live session, but you're not doing the live conference question. So you're really shooting yourself in the foot. You cannot get participation points if you do not do the live question. So it's showing up as you're absent. That's not my rule. It is the company's rule. Please do the live question. I don't understand it. You guys understand you have to do the question, right? Let me see. I don't want to call nobody out here, but let me see if they're in the building. Most of us know. Now, I ain't trying to start no competition, but Port Charlotte on the ball. Port Charlotte, man, they've been perfect attendance, perfect everything. Now, I'm just trying to say, like, y'all let these people run circles around y'all.
I was confused last week, but I'm on board this week.
Come on now, y'all. FTM Central Florida, y'all the biggest campuses. Orlando, Sanford, Tampa, and Port Charlotte is making waves up in here. You know it. I don't even have to really check theirs. I already know it's going to be done. Y'all, come on, pick it up. Now, maybe it's just me being a little competitive, but I need y'all to pick up the face and do the right thing. When midterm grades come out, I hate to tell people bad news. I hate to tell people bad news. I want to tell your campuses, they're going to be checking to see how well you're doing at midterm next Monday. And I don't want to give them bad news about you. So please, please, my friends, okay? I want rock stars. Rock stars. All I want is rock stars coming from this class. Any questions? All right.
I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So for the discussion, it says the worst interview ever. So I've never done an interview. So would I just make up one or?
That's a great question. What you're going to do if you've never done an interview is say what would be a horrible interview for you, right? Like, oh my God, the worst interview ever for me would be is if I got lost, if I showed up at the wrong place, or the worst interview ever for me would be. So give me a hypothetical.
If you want to be funny,
thank
go
you.
on TikTok and Google that.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Ian. All right. All right, my friends. So if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to see you back here tomorrow. Please go and do my question. Please, please, and please. Thank you so much, you guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.